Okay.
And he's like, I like that, Jackie. How about living in America for kids? And I'm like, no. And he told Mr. Dallas, he said, let her name it. She do all the work, let her name it. So that's how it started. And I took a very special child. She was dying. I had taken some other kids. There was a little boy that had no arms and legs. Believe it. It was horrible. I had many children that we were starting to do. And we did this trust because we were raising so much money, and we were giving them to these organizations. And we would hand them this money, and I would walk away, and something in my heart would say, how do I know? How am I sure that this money really went to what they say? How do I know they're not paying themselves a big salary? How do I know they're not buying pens and papers? You know what I'm saying? How do I know this money is not going into, like, if a veteran needs a television? How do I know they didn't go buy that TV? Because normally I would go buy the TV. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, yeah.
That's when me and Mr. Brown and Mr. Dallas sat down, and it was like, this is the best way to go. We're going to build this trust, and, of course, he told Mr. Dallas, he said, if anything happens to me, everything of mine will go into this trust. And, of course, I didn't have that much, but I said everything of mine, if I die, goes into the trust too. And at the time, Mr. Brown was not at what you call the financial level he was when he died. So it was kind of like the Three Musketeers sitting down, and none of us with a lot of money, okay? But we were able to give money to those charities by raising the money, you know what I mean? And, but if he had died at that time, I don't think it would have been a big thing because he owed so much money to the Internal Revenue Service. He had lost everything, and he was starting to try to build an image back.
And Buddy Dallas, just to clarify, he was actually James Brown's attorney, not your attorney.
Yes, he ended up, during that time, being my lawyer, too.
Okay, but originally he was James Brown's attorney. You met him through...
He was originally James Brown's lawyer, yes.
Now, what was it that caused... was it divorces? What caused James Brown to lose all his money and not do so well back around then? I can't really answer that question. I know it had a lot to do probably with just times changing, the music changing, and going to disco. Everything changed. Gotcha. Now, did you two get along? Did you like him?
Oh, in the beginning, yeah, he was a really great guy. Yeah, he was. I mean, he was, very professional. He was a very devout gentleman, a very religious man. He got blessed on everything. And, but about a year into it, I've started noticing some peculiar behavior with him. He was slow to answer questions correctly. In the studio, he was showing some odd behavior. He would, in the middle of a conversation, go off into something else and start rambling, and I couldn't understand him, and I started thinking maybe this man, because he was in his 50s, maybe this man possibly has the beginnings of Alzheimer, or is having strokes, small strokes, PAs, whatever they want to call them. And I never suspected drugs because I never did drugs. I never smoked pot. I never did coke. I never drank. And here I was in the rock and roll business, but I was just one that stayed away from it. I always felt like I didn't want anything controlling my mind.
Now,
because it was nutty enough as it was.
Yeah, I hear you. Now, but he never used any drugs in front of you.
Do what?
At that time, he never used any drugs in front of you.
No, he did not.
Did he drink in front of you?
No, he did not.
Okay. Now, what year again is this we're talking about now? What period of time?
It was probably about, I would say late 85, going into 86. I started.
Now, around that period of time, had you met Al Sharpton yet?
I knew who. You're tricky. I knew who Mr. Sharpton was, only because Adrienne Brown, who became my best friend, who was Mr. Brown's wife, she started talking about Revy. And, of course, Mr. Brown would talk about the Reverend. But it was a very strange thing because there was a lot of reverends around these people.
Okay.
I mean, you got to understand, I was in the Deep South, okay? And in the Deep South, on the Red Georgia Clay Roads, there's a lot of reverends, okay? And, you know, so reverend
you'll have some churches, too, some of these churches, where not only everybody is a member, is a deacon. Deacon so-and-so, deacon so-and-so. But, by the time you shake hands with half the church is a deacon.
Well, I mean, Mr. Brown took me to a church during some of the roughest times, and when they were out to kill us all, and there was, they put the stuff all over the walls and, the windows so that nobody could see in, and we sat down, and there was like probably I'd say 10 to 12 men sitting there, and Mr. Brown looked up and said, "This is Reverend so-and-so, this is Reverend so-and-so, Reverend so-and-so, Reverend so-and-so," and I thought, my word, I'd never seen as many reverends in my life, but I was there, and, but yes, the answer to your question is, the Revy was called Revy, so, I started learning about him, yes.
But would he travel down to Georgia? Did you meet him in person or no?
He was coming in a lot. The peculiar thing about him is that he'd come in, and Mr. Brown always had to have a lot of money for him. A lot of money always went into Mr. Reverend's hands, Reverend Sharpton's hands when he would come. Adrienne would mention it a lot, and of course Mr. Brown would say, "Well, the Reverend Sharpton's coming down, and of course his hands are going to be out for the money."
Right.
So, there's got to be some money. Call Mr. Dallas. There's got to be some money for Mr. Sharpton.
Now, was this because the good Reverend Sharpton was was selling tickets for him or doing some kind of promotion? Because I know over the years he's been involved in ticket sales and different concert promotions as well. Our good friend Reverend Al. Is this the kind of business activities he was involved in with Mr. Brown?
I'm going to tell you something because this gets real murky.
Okay.
There was a lot of little businesses going on that Mr. Sharpton was involved in that I knew about that were not what I would call reputable businesses. Of course, you look up. And, so I always kind of to myself kind of questioned what this man's real business was.
Well, give me an idea. What kind of business? What kind of business did you know about?
Well, he had some Christian magazines, and he had some other business going, publishing and stuff like that, and he was always, putting this stuff out for radio and all this other stuff, and it's just he would come in, and he always had that briefcase, and
right.
Of course now I know that briefcase had to do with his new title, Reverend Rat.
Yeah. Okay, just a little background, a little bit in the interest of disclosure. when I grew up in New York City, and I was a radical activist, and I used to protest for civil rights and all that kind of stuff back around the 70s, late 70s, and very early 80s. So I had run into Reverend Al, many times when he had that his Action Network. I think first it was called like the Youth Action Network, and then the Action. Yeah, well, there was an Action Network involved, and so. I had met Reverend Al, and I found him to be a very sincere guy back in the early 80s when I had first met him. Of course, I was a young guy, and he was considered my senior. He already had a big organization going on, so I had to show him respect. And our activities were mostly organizing demonstrations and stuff like that through the Black Vets for Social Justice and Reverend Daughtry's organizations and stuff like that. But as the years went on, I had run into Al Sharpton other times. Because I owned a nightclub myself, city, and a lot of those guys you hear about where he's walking around with that briefcase with the wiretaps were the guys who came into my club and were shaking down my club. It's the same people, same group of people. And then I also knew him through different circumstances because I'm a private investigator, and back then I was working as a private investigator, and we were doing different things like counter surveillance and finding wiretaps and sweeping for bugs and things like that. And so we brushed against these different groups and stuff like that. So I've had my different experiences with Al Sharpton as well. And I'm not surprised by anything I hear about those accusations or allegations about all the different allegations you hear. When he's wearing the cowboy hat and he's doing the coke deal. When you hear about the ticket scalping. I'm not surprised by anything. Okay.
Well, the cocaine, and this is real interesting because James Brown didn't do cocaine.
Okay.
But all of a sudden, there was the new thing coming in down there, which I was a Georgia redneck. I knew about Jack Daniels, and I knew about pot, and I knew about beer, and, the redneck style of life. And all of a sudden, there was starting to become the erratic behavior with James Brown. And let me explain to you, when I say erratic behavior, this went beyond what the human mind can even fathom. And my friend Adrian Brown became very dark, and their behavior became so erratic. Did
Adrian become involved with the drugs as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And there was a lot of all night long phone calls and guns. Many guns started coming into play. And all of a sudden, Mr. Brown, a lot of people think that this man just walks on the street. No, he didn't. He always had a security detail. He always had people around him. But all of a sudden, the presence of weapons were around him. And I was young, and I thought, wow, when you go to concerts, we used to carry security guards. They used to carry guns, and maybe this is normal, because I'd seen other entertainers carrying guns. It wasn't a shock to me, you know what I'm saying? And so I wasn't really afraid of him in that sense, but his behavior I thought was getting a little weird, and I took him because of Mr. Dallas and, of course, New York. We took him to the hospital. I took him numerous times to the hospital. I took Adrian to the hospital numerous times. Adrian was actually committed against her will. And, of course, there was the suspicion of drugs and then the major arrest and him going crazy, and it seemed like every day he was getting arrested. Adrian Brown was flying to New York, and of course she was going to see the Revy, and she got busted up in New York. Then she got busted getting back on the plane to come back to Augusta. The second she stepped off, she was busted in Georgia, and it was like every other day.
Wait, okay, what was she getting busted with?
She was getting busted with PCP, pot, that kind of stuff. And
large amounts, small amounts?
Brown.
Was it large amounts or small amounts?
It was a pretty good bit, and where was this reverend? Here I mean, you know, she's sitting down there telling me all about this reverend, and here's, you know,